Hey, the rule is if there's a white player on you and you black, you better go at him. Like it's just an unwritten rule. Go at the white players. Listen, hey.
The best player in women's basketball sat down on a podcast, laughed, and said something that would have died in a locker room 20 years ago. Instead, it got clipped, captioned, and blasted across every timeline in America within hours. And here's the part that makes this bigger than one viral moment. She said it during the single worst week she possibly could have. Because while her clip was making the rounds, 11 members of the United States Congress were putting the finishing touches on a letter to her league's commissioner. A letter with words like accountability in it. A letter with a deadline. A letter that name drops the Department of Justice. One comment, one foul, one piece of government stationery. 3 separate stories that collided in the same 7 days and turned the hottest moment in WNBA history into something the league has no idea how to handle. By the end of this video, you're going to see how a 40-year-old Larry Bird story, a fist to the throat, and a congressman from West Texas all ended up tangled in the same knot. And you're going to see the twist almost nobody covering this story is telling you, because it doesn't fit anyone's narrative. Let's start with the clip. A'ja Wilson is not a role player mouthing off for attention. She's the reigning MVP, a multiple-time champion, statistically one of the greatest to ever play the women's game. When she talks, it carries weight. So, when she sat down with Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson on All the Smoke, one of the biggest basketball podcasts on the planet, millions of ears were already pointed her way. The conversation drifted somewhere old-school basketball conversations always drift: Larry Bird. Specifically, the legendary story about how Bird took it as a personal insult whenever an opposing coach put a white defender on him. And before anyone assumes that story is internet folklore, it isn't. Bird himself has told it, on camera, more than once. He said it genuinely irritated him when a white guy came out to guard him, and that he'd ask the defender if his coach had a problem with him. Alyssa Thomas told his own version of it on this very same podcast years ago, describing Bird treating an all-white defensive assignment like a slap in the face. This is documented basketball history, told and retold by the men who lived it. Wilson's contribution was to call it something like an unwritten Hooper rule, the playground logic that says you attack the matchup nobody expects to stop you. And here's the detail that matters most, the one that gets cropped out of the angriest reposts. She's laughing while she says it. She literally says it's never that deep. Those are her words in the same breath, in the same clip. She wasn't drafting a manifesto. She was riffing on trash talk folklore with 2 retired NBA veterans who trade stories like this for a living. So how did a laughing anecdote about a man who retired in 1992 become a national controversy? That answer has almost nothing to do with what was said and everything to do with when. Here's a rule of the modern internet that every athlete learns the hard way. A sentence doesn't mean what you meant. It means what it looks like at second 45 of a clip with the context sheared off. In a locker room, Wilson's comment is nothing. On a podcast with millions of listeners, chopped into a 30-second vertical video with a caption doing the heavy lifting, it becomes a Rorschach test. Strip away the laughter, strip away the Larry Bird history. What's left, to a viewer scrolling past with no context, is the best player in the league appearing to describe targeting opponents by race. Said flat like that, it sounds ugly. And whether that reading is fair or wildly uncharitable, it landed in a league that has spent an entire season marinating in racial tension. Rivalries that started as basketball stories curdled into culture war proxies months ago. Every hard foul is replayed frame by frame. Every quote gets sorted into teams. The audience watching the WNBA right now isn't just watching basketball. A huge chunk of it is watching for evidence, hunting for the next clip that confirms what they already believe.
The WNBA and anyone who would listen to get being a victim. Okay, if Magic did to Angel what Angel did to Caitlyn after the national championship game, Bird would have busted him upside his head.
Even on the podcast itself, the read the room point got made. There's simply too much racial static crackling around this league right now for a throwaway reference to a 40-year-old anecdote to land as a joke. It lands like a match dropped near gasoline. Timing didn't just amplify the story, timing is the story. But if this were Wilson's first clip like this, it probably still blows over in a weekend. It's not her first clip, and the internet has a long memory. Within hours of the All the Smoke moment going viral, an older clip came roaring back into circulation, and this is the pattern that's actually doing the damage. It's footage of Wilson in an earlier podcast conversation talking about race and opportunity in women's basketball, using Paige Bueckers, one of the sport's biggest white stars, as her example. In the clip, Wilson describes Bueckers as someone who understands her privilege and how it helped carry her to a certain point, while acknowledging in the same breath that Bueckers is obviously a great player. Let's be honest about this in both directions, because most videos on this topic only give you one. Direction 1, an athlete talking candidly about race and opportunity in her own sport is not a scandal. It's not even unusual. Players across every league have had thoughtful things to say on this subject for decades, and Bueckers herself has spoken publicly about privilege in women's basketball in very similar terms, famously using an award show stage to spotlight black women in the sport. Wilson wasn't inventing a controversy out of thin air. She was participating in a conversation the players themselves have been having openly for years. Direction 2. Delivery is everything, and this is where it keeps going sideways for Wilson. There's a version of that conversation that sounds reflective, and there's a version that sounds like a lesson being handed to teammates who didn't ask for one. Where it lands depends entirely on who's listening, and right now, a very large, very new audience is listening with its arms crossed. Then there's the story that got stapled onto that clip, the claim that Kelsey Plum, Wilson's former Aces teammate who was sitting nearby, gave a flat okay and later put distance between herself and Wilson. Here's where we have to be more honest than the algorithm wants us to be. That entire narrative is built on body language and vibes. Plum has never said a public word confirming any of it. Nobody actually knows what she thought in that moment. It's an interpretation being sold as a fact, and you should treat it exactly that way. But here's the part that's true no matter how you slice it. Wilson keeps ending up as the main character in conversations that make her look worse instead of better. When you're the most accomplished player alive and the headlines orbit the tension around you instead of the trophies in front of you, that's a problem that talent alone cannot fix, and it feeds directly into the argument that's generating most of the actual anger. The loudest reaction to the Wilson clip isn't really about the Wilson clip. It's a hypothetical, and it goes like this. Flip the roles. Imagine a white star player sitting on a podcast laughing about an unwritten rule to go at the black players. Imagine how fast that clip travels, how fast the statements come out, how fast the apology tour begins. The people furious this week aren't just mad about one sentence. They're mad because they're convinced the outrage machinery only runs in one direction. And in the angriest corners of this discourse, the claim gets even bigger. You've probably seen versions of it. Commentators arguing that you can't be straight and white in this league without paying a tax for it, attaching names like Kelsey Plum, Sabrina Ionescu, and Caitlin Clark to the theory, pointing at every flashpoint involving those players as another data point. So, let's do what most channels won't do and actually weigh that claim instead of just repeating it or dunking on it. First, the honest pushback, and it's substantial. White players haven't just survived in the WNBA, they've thrived in it since the league tipped off. Rebecca Loba, Sue Bird, Diana Taurasi, Elena Delle Donne, Breanna Stewart, Sabrina Ionescu, Paige Bueckers. That's a list of faces of the league, champions, and MVPs. Trash talk in basketball has always run in every direction, from every background, since before the three-point line existed. A handful of tense clips is not a league-wide policy, and there are hundreds of players whose daily reality has nothing to do with any of this.
But here's the honest concession the other way. The specific flashpoints keep happening to a specific type of player, in public, on camera, and the league keeps looking flat-footed every single time. Whether the pattern is real, exaggerated, or entirely manufactured by selective clipping, the perception of the pattern has now become its own problem, one the league has to answer for whether it wants to or not. When enough of your newest, most valuable audience believes the rules of outrage only run one way, that belief starts doing damage regardless of whether it's true. And that feeling, that grievance sitting under everything, is exactly what a group of politicians in Washington decided to pick up and weaponize. Because while the internet was arguing about a podcast, something much stranger was landing on the commissioner's desk. To understand the letter, you need the foul that lit the fuse. June 24th, Indianapolis, Fever versus Mercury. During a scramble, Phoenix forward Alyssa Thomas makes contact, her fist to Caitlin Clark's throat. Watch it in real time and it's a blur of bodies. The referees on the floor call nothing. Play continues. It's only the next day, after the league reviews the tape, that the play gets upgraded to a flagrant foul 2, and Thomas gets suspended for 1 game. For a lot of fans, that sequence, no call in the moment, a quiet upgrade after the fact, a single game, was the final straw in a 3-year argument about how Clark gets officiated. And a few days later, Clark herself poured fuel on it, telling reporters the league needs to do a better job protecting its players, noting this conversation has been going on since she arrived. Then it escalated somewhere no basketball story is supposed to go. On July 8th, 11 Republican members of Congress, led by Texas Representative August Pfluger, sent a formal letter to WNBA Commissioner Kathy Engelbert. The language in it is not subtle. It describes Clark as the face of the league, credits her for driving record ratings and new sponsors, and then accuses the league of tolerating repeated acts of physical hostility against her. It catalogs the greatest hits, Clark being hip-checked, poked in the eye, and struck in the throat, and argues these incidents go far beyond routine physical play, while officiating has failed to hold anyone accountable. And then it goes further than any sports letter you've ever heard of. It raises the possibility that the treatment of Clark could amount to a hostile work environment, and it floats the alphabet soup of federal enforcement: the Department of Justice, the Department of Labor, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Pfluger posted the letter publicly and declared he was putting the league on notice, warning of a federal crackdown if what he called violent targeting continues. The letter demands the WNBA answer 3 specific questions about how it reviews on-court violence, how it disciplines players, and how it protects athletes from harassment by July 24th. Members of Congress threatening a basketball league with civil rights enforcement over fouls. Whatever your politics, take a second to appreciate how surreal that sentence is. And it's completely fair to be skeptical of politicians who seem to have discovered women's basketball existed about 15 minutes ago. But before you file this entirely under political theater, follow the money, because that's what makes it more than a stunt. Caitlin Clark isn't just a good player. She is the single biggest economic engine this league has ever had. Arenas that sat half-empty for years sell out the moment her team hits the schedule. Networks build broadcast windows around her. So underneath the civil rights costume, the letter is really making a business argument. You are letting opponents tee off on the most valuable asset your sport has ever produced, and your answer was a 1-game suspension? That argument isn't easy to wave off. But here's what almost every video screaming about this letter conveniently leaves out, and it changes the entire story. Start with Alyssa Thomas, the supposed villain of this whole saga. Thomas said the contact was an accident, a loose bar scramble, not an assassination attempt. You can believe her or not, the league clearly thought it warranted a flagrant foul. But here's what happened to her next. Thomas told reporters she has been receiving death threats since the incident. Death threats over a basketball foul. And who came to her defense? Caitlin Clark, the player this entire crusade is supposedly protecting, stood at a podium and condemned the threats, saying harassment and hate are never okay, not toward opponents, not toward anyone. Her own head coach, Stephanie White, said the same. So the woman being framed as a victim in need of congressional rescue spent her media availability defending the player who fouled her.
Now, the twist on top of the twist. When the congressional letter dropped, the Indiana Fever, Clark's own team, put out a statement that quietly detonated the whole premise. The organization said neither the team nor Clark had any interaction with anyone in that congressional group, and that they weren't even aware the letter existed until it was public. Read that again. The the lawmakers riding to Caitlin Clark's rescue never spoke to Caitlin Clark, never spoke to her team. The cavalry showed up to a rescue nobody requested, planted a flag, and posted it on social media. This is the piece that should reframe everything you've watched about this story. Clark has spent 3 years refusing to be anybody's political mascot from any direction. She wants to hoop, and yet she's become a mirror. Everyone who looks at her sees whatever they already believed. To one side, she's proof of a league that resents its golden goose. To another, she's a proxy being used to wage a culture war her actual employer wants no part of. Both sides claim to speak for her. Neither one asked her. So, does the letter itself actually have teeth? Time to separate the noise from the reality. Here's the honest legal picture minus the cable news dramatics. A letter from members of Congress is not a subpoena. It carries no binding force whatsoever. The WNBA is a private league that writes and enforces its own rulebook, and there is a very strong argument that Commissioner Engelbert can read that letter, disagree with every word of it, and set it aside without breaking a single law. The DOJ and EEOC threats are at this stage exactly that, threats in a press release. Hostile work environment claims are built for discrimination and harassment cases, and stretching that framework to cover hard fouls in a professional contact sport would be, to put it gently, novel legal territory. So as a legal instrument, this letter is mostly smoke, but as a reputational weapon, it's very real, because the headline was never going to be a court date. The headline is that the United States government felt compelled to write your league a letter about protecting its biggest star. That sentence does damage all by itself forever in every future negotiation and every future news cycle. And now let's steelman the strongest pushback, because it deserves a real hearing instead of a steamroll. The counterargument says this entire panic is overblown and, frankly, insulting to women athletes. The WNBA has always been a genuinely physical league. Its history was built by players who made every rookie earn every inch. And the men's game offers the perfect parallel. Jordan didn't reach the mountaintop because someone wrote a letter. The bad boy Pistons hammered him for years. Hand checks, clotheslines, the infamous Jordan rules. And the fix wasn't federal intervention. The fix was Jordan getting stronger and winning anyway. By that logic, Clark is simply getting the same veteran welcome every generational phenom gets, amplified 1,000-fold because the entire country happens to be watching this one. Which leaves the genuine question sitting in the middle of all this, and reasonable people land on opposite sides of it. Is the officiating around Clark a real fairness problem the league keeps ignoring, or is a congressional letter about basketball fouls a culture war trophy that treats grown professional athletes like they can't handle contact? Notice that both things could be partially true at once. The officiating can genuinely need fixing, and the congressional letter can genuinely be theater. Those aren't mutually exclusive, they're this exact story. Because here's where all three threads, the podcast, the foul, and the letter, braid together into the real problem. Zoom all the way out and look at what the WNBA is actually holding right now. Record ratings, sold-out arenas, new fans who never watched a single possession of women's basketball before 2024. Politicians, podcasts, and every sports desk in every sports section in America arguing about this league in public every single week. That is free attention that money literally cannot buy. The kind of cultural moment leagues spend decades and fortunes trying to manufacture. The NBA in 1980 got Bird and Magic. The WNBA in 2026 got something arguably bigger, the whole country watching at once.
And instead of steering that moment, the league is letting it curdle into a grievance war it refuses to referee. A podcast clip becomes a race controversy, and the league says nothing. Its biggest star publicly asks for better protection, and the response is silence. Congress sends a letter with a deadline attached, and as of now, no official response. Commissioner Engelbert has faced growing criticism for ducking the hard interviews and dodging the pointed questions while the bonfire grows. And silence from the top of an organization doesn't calm a story like this, it feeds it. every day without leadership, the loudest and least careful voices get to define what this league is. Here's the thing about mirrors. They don't care what you want it to see. A'ja Wilson looked into a camera and told an old basketball story, and half the country saw a joke, while the other half saw a confession. Caitlin Clark took a foul, and one side saw hard-nosed basketball, while the other saw a target on her back. Same clips, same frames, completely different movies. The WNBA has become a mirror for a country that can't agree on what it's looking at, and the league's answer, so far, has been to close its eyes and hope. This doesn't slow down on its own. The more Clark plays, the more every hit gets replayed frame by frame. The more Wilson talks, the more every sentence gets clipped and captioned. The more the league stays silent, the more everyone else fills that silence for it. It's all snowballing straight into the rest of this season, and the deadline on that congressional letter is already ticking. So now I want to hear from you, and be honest down in that comment section. Is A'ja Wilson getting dragged for a laughing reference to an old basketball story Larry Bird himself has told on camera? Or did she hand her critics exactly the ammunition they were hunting for? And that letter from Congress, is it standing up for the biggest star the sport has ever seen, or turning a basketball league into a political circus? Especially now that you know Clark's own team says nobody ever asked them. Tell me which side you land on. And if you made it this far, you already know this story isn't finished, so make sure you're around when the next chapter drops.